A sleepy New Jersey suburb in 2006 felt like the kind of place where nothing truly terrible could ever happen. Streets were lined with sugar maples that turned copper in the fall, and every family seemed to know every other, at least enough to wave while mowing the lawn. The high school, a brick building with faded blue paint around the windows, was the center of its own small universe. On weekday mornings, teenagers spilled from buses still rubbing sleep from their eyes, sneakers squeaking on the polished floors, the soft rumble of conversation echoing through locker-lined hallways. From a distance, it was ordinary, forgettable, the kind of town where dreams started small, and life was measured by seasons rather than milestones. But beneath that gentle rhythm, there were rooms full of silence, places untouched by sunlight, by laughter, by time. For Emma Dalton, that silence had been following her for 3 years. She walked the hallway with her head lowered, hugging her backpack like a shield. Teachers knew her as polite and shy, always prepared, quietly brilliant. Her classmates barely knew her at all. She wasn't invisible exactly. She just seemed like someone who had decided long ago not to expect anything from anyone. There was a heaviness in her steps, the weight of something she never talked about, but everyone remembered, because in the fall of 2003, her older brother Liam had vanished. Even now, in 2006, people still whispered his name sometimes, but only when they thought Emma wasn't close enough to hear. They whispered in the same tone one uses to talk about a ghost, low, cautious, almost respectful. In a town where news spread faster than truth, his disappearance was the biggest story that had ever blown through. Search parties, posters taped to storefront windows, evening news vans parked beside the school entrance. For months, the town felt suspended, waiting for answers. But the answers never came. Eventually, the posters faded. The news vans left. The world moved on. Her family didn't. Emma's house sat near the end of a quiet street, where trees leaned toward one another like old friends trading secrets. The curtains always remained half-closed, and neighbors seldom saw the Daltons outside anymore. Her father, once a light-hearted man with loud weekend laughter, started leaving early for work and returning after dark. Her mother stayed indoors, drifting from room to room like a shadow. The kitchen, once warm with stories and music, fell silent. Inside Liam's room, everything had been preserved exactly as he left it. A shelf lined with science fiction paperbacks. A baseball glove still sitting open atop his desk. The faint scent of cedar and laundry detergent. Even his walls, covered in ticket stubs, sketches, and maps, remained untouched, as if time were afraid to disturb them. Every detail of his life remained frozen, waiting for his return. Emma often found herself standing at his door late at night, one hand pressed against the wood, listening for whispers that never came. She was only 12 when he vanished. Now at 15, she carried a memory of him like a fragile glass object, too precious to set down, too painful to hold tightly. At school, she lingered on the edges. In the cafeteria, she took a seat by the windows, where light fell unevenly across the scratched tabletop, and where she could watch people without needing to speak. Her silence was not a choice, it was instinct. Grief had rewritten her vocabulary, turning every thought into something she could only feel, never explain. The world outside still moved with ordinary rhythm. Football games every Friday. Pep rallies with forced smiles. The scent of cafeteria pizza drifting through open doors. Students planning SAT prep and college visits. Yet for Emma, all of it seemed far away, like a movie projected on a wall she could never step through. Still, on rare mornings when the sky was pale and cloudless, she allowed herself to remember the days before everything changed. Liam walking her to school, their conversations about comic books, the way he teased her for overthinking everything. He was quiet, but clever in a way that made you feel seen. He had a grin that slipped sideways, as though he expected trouble but welcomed it anyway. He had dreams, big ones, and then he was gone. People told Emma that time heals. But time had only taught her how to keep breathing while the wound stayed open. She learned not to flinch when people avoided her gaze. She learned how to answer questions without revealing anything at all. She learned how to carry someone who wasn't there anymore. Every morning she walked to the same doors Liam once passed, stepping on the same tiles, hearing echoes of the same bell that marked the beginning and end of each class. Sometimes she wondered whether he still walked beside her, unseen, whether his footsteps had simply drifted into another world. Others wondered, too, but no one wondered enough to keep searching. The police had called it a cold case after only a year. No evidence, no witnesses, no footprints. Rumors flared. He ran away. He joined someone older. He got mixed up in things no one wanted to talk about. But their house held no answers. Only silence. And silence had settled into Emma's bones. Yet something about 2006 felt different. Subtle. Like the first thin crack forming across ice. A shift she couldn't name. She felt it in the way the hallways seemed to watch her rather than the other way around. In the way the wind crept through town, sharp and restless. She didn't yet know that the past was stirring again, or that the quiet life she had wrapped herself in was about to split open. But it would begin soon, with a discovery small enough to seem like chance, but powerful enough to unravel everything that had been carefully buried. For now, though, she simply walked to class with her head down, unaware that the pieces of her brother's story were waiting, silent, patient, ready to pull her toward the truth. The days after Liam disappeared blurred together into a strange, dreamlike season, one that Emma could still remember with disturbing clarity. In her memory, it began as an ordinary morning in 2003, a Saturday softened by pale sunlight drifting through the windows. Their mother was in the kitchen making pancakes, humming faintly. Their father was reading the paper. Emma, only 12, sat at the table swinging her feet, laughing at nothing in particular. It was a morning that felt safe, so harmless it could have been folded into any other day. Liam had come downstairs later than usual, wearing that worn gray hoodie he loved, the one with a frayed cuff from years of nervously pulling at it. He grabbed an apple, ruffled Emma's hair, and told his mom he would be back by lunchtime. He always came back by lunchtime. No one questioned anything. The sun rolled upward. Clouds drifted lazily. Noon came and went. Lunch sat cooling on the counter, while their mother looked out the window every few minutes. By late afternoon, her father stepped out, pretending he was just going to check a few usual places. He returned an hour later with nothing to say. And when night fell, they called the police. That was the last day Emma remembered believing everything would be fine. At first, the world seemed to rush in with helping hands. Officers walked door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen a 17-year-old boy with dark hair and a gentle smile. Volunteers combed streets and parks. Flyers were printed and taped to lampposts and grocery store doors. The cold November air seemed sharper that year, as though the town itself was watching. Emma remembered the way light from the kitchen fell across the dining room, where her mother sat beside a silent phone, waiting for it to ring. She remembered the smell of coffee at 2 a.m., and her father pacing the hallway, his face pale and drawn. She remembered reporters parked outside, their voices muffled behind closed blinds. The search lasted for weeks, then months. Police questioned Liam's teachers, friends, neighbors. Most had nothing to offer, no clue, no suspicion. One classmate recalled seeing him near the railroad tracks. Another thought he'd been acting distracted, maybe worried. But nothing solid formed. Eventually, as happens in small towns, attention shifted. New stories replaced old ones. The search scaled down, and the silence began. The Dalton home grew colder in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. Their mother kept Liam's room untouched, adjusting his blankets sometimes as if expecting him to return. His laundry stayed folded in a drawer that no one dared open. His shoes sat lying neatly near his closet. His desk remained a kingdom of unfinished thoughts. Sketches, half-written notes, loose sheets of paper that no longer made sense. His absence filled every empty space. At school, Emma noticed a shift in how people looked at her. In the hallways, conversations halted when she passed. Some students avoided her, frightened by the weight of her grief. Others stared with a strange curiosity, like she was a reminder that terrible things could happen even here. Some kids whispered stories. He ran away. He was depressed. He got into something dangerous. Rumors are born from silence, and silence was all they had. The police kept in touch for a while, checking in every few weeks, then every few months. After a year, those calls stopped. They told her parents there were no leads, that they had exhausted every direction. Without evidence, without witnesses, there was nothing left to chase. It became an open wound that stopped bleeding, present but numb. Emma watched as her family changed in ways that felt irreversible. Her father withdrew into stern quietness. On some nights, she could hear him in the garage, opening boxes, rummaging through old belongings, searching for anything he might have missed. Other nights, he simply sat there in silence. Her mother moved like someone always half asleep. Some mornings she forgot to eat. Other mornings she slipped into Liam's room and stayed there for hours, sitting in his desk chair, clutching an old sweatshirt pressed against her chest. She stopped cooking. She stopped singing. She stopped living in all the small ways that once made their house a home. Emma learned to make her own sandwiches. She learned to do laundry. She learned to keep her grades up without anyone asking how school was. Her childhood ended quietly, not with a loud event, but with the subtle realization that no one was coming to save them. She clung to old memories to fill the quiet. Liam reading late into the night with a flashlight, the two of them racing bikes down the street, laughing until their sides hurt. He had always been curious, always searching for something bigger. He loved puzzles, mysteries, stories about people who disappeared and were found again. Sometimes Emma wondered if that curiosity had led him too far. By the second year, even neighbors stopped asking how they were. Their voices softened with pity, then faded. Life outside continued with familiar rhythms. Birthdays, weddings, graduations, while the Daltons remained frozen in place. Time became a weight rather than a healer. There were moments, small, sharp moments, when Emma could feel the world forgetting him. The flyers curled under rain and were removed. The news moved on. His name was spoken less and less. She hated that more than anything. For her, he remained everywhere. His smile in old photographs, his handwriting on scraps of paper, his shy kindness lingering in the air. But for others, he became a story from a past season, a memory too distant to hold. By 2006, Emma had learned to go through the motions. Wake up, walk to school, take notes, eat lunch, pretend she was okay. Her grief sat like a stone at the bottom of a river, always there, but rarely seen. She never talked about him. There was no point. People didn't know what to say anymore. Sometimes she wondered if he might still be alive. Sometimes she wondered if he wasn't. Both possibilities terrified her, but she had stopped expecting answers. Then one quiet afternoon, almost 3 years after he walked out of their house without a word, something unexpected resurfaced, a fragment of his life that she didn't remember seeing before. Something small, almost accidental. She didn't know yet that it would be the spark that would pull her backward into the past, unraveling the quiet life she had built around her grief. She didn't know that the silence around Liam's disappearance was not empty at all. It was full of hidden truths waiting to be found. The discovery began innocently, almost as an afterthought, one of those moments that feels too small to matter until it quietly changes everything. It was late September, still warm enough for the air to carry the last traces of summer. At school, a new English teacher named Mr. Hale had stepped into the position mid-year. He was young, with soft eyes and a calm voice that made students feel as though their thoughts were worth hearing. On his first day, he assigned a creative project. Find an object from your past, something forgotten, something quietly meaningful, and use it as inspiration to write a personal essay. Most students groaned, flipping through their minds for old birthday cards or keepsakes. Emma sat still. Her past was a delicate thing she avoided touching, a fragile glass she feared might shatter in her hands. She considered turning in an old book or an elementary school drawing, anything that wouldn't hurt to remember. But when she got home, something tugged at her, an instinct she couldn't explain. Her mother was asleep on the couch, worn by another day that had passed without change. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft ticking of the hallway clock. Emma climbed the stairs to her room and stood for a long moment at the threshold, as if waiting for permission to enter her own space. She opened her closet, digging through old boxes, school crafts, forgotten toys, a tangle of ribbons and costume jewelry. At the bottom of the stack, Beneath a layer of dust-colored memories, she found something she didn't recognize at first, a flat cardboard box wrapped in newspaper. Her breath caught as she pulled it into the light. She carried it to her bed and sat down, her heart tapping quietly against her ribs. The box was heavier than it looked, sealed not with tape, but string-tied carefully into a knot. That alone felt unusual. Her mother had never packed things like this. She hesitated, fingertips brushing the coarse twine, as though touching something that didn't entirely belong to her. With a slow inhale, she loosened the knot. Inside were items she hadn't seen in years, a folded high school schedule with Liam's name at the top, a library receipt, and a few ticket stubs from concerts she knew he'd loved. Beneath them, tucked inside a faded blue folder, was a notebook, his notebook. Her breath stilled. It was spiral-bound, the cover worn and softly creased. A sticker on the front had peeled at one corner. She recognized it from his desk, something he had treated with casual affection. Seeing it now felt like opening a door she had believed permanently shut. For a long moment, she simply held it, her fingers tracing its edges, afraid to open it fully. She had spent years imagining what he might have been thinking before he disappeared, replaying memories, collecting theories without proof. Now, here was something he had written, thoughts that could lead back to the world he inhabited before he vanished. When she finally opened the first page, she found scribbles about everyday things. Chemistry notes, physics equations, random doodles of stars, and small cityscapes, nothing unusual. The next few pages were similar. Assignments, unfinished diary-like reflections, reminders to return library books or meet friends after class. His handwriting flowed messily, letters leaning forward as though eager to spill their stories faster than his hand could follow. And then, several pages in, the tone shifted. The writing became tighter, more focused. Words stacked over each other, lines drawn, arrows pointing to the margins. Meet me where the river bends. Tell no one. The sentence sat alone at the top of the page, underlined twice. There was no date, no explanation. Emma stared at it, feeling a subtle tremor under her skin. She turned the page. More notes. She knows more than she says. Don't trust him. Ask about the transfers. Not coincidences. Emma felt the room tilt slightly. These were not the kinds of things he would have written for school. These were warnings, secrets. Below a messy graph, another line. If anything feels wrong, walk away. Her pulse quickened. She turned more pages. Some were blank. Others held fragments. Names reduced to initials. Maps of school hallways scribbled with circles around certain rooms. Dates with question marks beside them. It looked like a puzzle, each piece dangling without the rest. One page near the middle was different. A series of small sketches, drawn with careful detail. She recognized certain things. The old football field, the back entrance of the school, a row of trees behind the gym. But there were symbols next to them. Tiny cross marks, arrows drawn in jagged motion, and in one corner, a star. At the bottom of the page, a note, "Don't let them find this." Her hands were trembling now. She leaned back, staring at the open notebook. The air around her felt suddenly heavier, the kind of quiet that arrives before a storm. This wasn't just her brother's old school work. It felt like a message left behind, a trail he had begun to follow. When her father came home that evening, Emma quietly closed the notebook and slid it back into the box. Instinct told her not to share. Not yet. Something about the words felt intimate, unfinished, and possibly dangerous in ways she didn't understand. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those sentences, sharp and urgent. Meet me where the river bends. She knows more than she says. The thoughts pressed into her dreams. She imagined Liam walking alone at dusk, following a quiet current to some hidden place where secrets waited. She dreamt of him calling her name just out of reach, his voice pulling her toward the edge of a truth she was not ready to face. In the morning, she placed a notebook into her backpack, carrying it to school like a fragile heartbeat. During classes, she opened it under her desk, eyes darting across its cryptic pages, searching for patterns. Nothing made sense alone. She needed someone who could help her see what she was missing. At lunch, she found Jake, her closest thing to a friend. though friend was a word that felt too bright for something so quiet. He was thoughtful, cautious, the kind of person who asked questions only when he knew the answers mattered. Without speaking, she slid the notebook across the table. Jake skimmed through it, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. He paused on the page with a repeated warning. Don't trust him. He whispered, careful not to let anyone hear. Do you think this has something to do with what happened? Emma didn't answer. She didn't have to. The notebook had awakened something in her that grief had kept dormant, a restless need to understand, to follow the threads her brother left behind. She didn't know where they led, only that they belonged to him, and if he had taken the time to write them, it meant something. It meant she couldn't ignore them. As the final bell rang that day, students poured into hallways, laughing, shouting, rushing toward buses and cars. Emma stood still, clutching the notebook to her chest. The hallway felt different somehow, alive with invisible trails she had never noticed before. It was the first real sign that the past was not finished with her. The notebook wasn't just a relic. It was a key, and somewhere on the other side of its cryptic words, her brother's story was waiting to be found. The days that followed were steeped in a quiet electricity, like the air before a heavy storm. Emma found herself returning to the notebook again and again, though she barely understood what she was looking for. The words Liam had left behind were fragments, cryptic, unsettling, and the more she read them, the more they felt like whispers from somewhere just beyond the edge of memory. She took the notebook everywhere, keeping it tucked beneath her textbooks, as though losing it would mean losing the last thread binding her to him. At night, she sat at her desk with only a small lamp glowing beside her, poring over every page. It became a ritual, silent, obsessive. She searched for patterns in his handwriting, repeating each sentence under her breath until their meanings blurred and reformed in her mind. One line haunted her more than any other. Meet me where the river bends. Tell no one. The river. There was only one river in town, slow-moving, bordered by willow trees and old industrial ruins. It curved gently near the north edge of town, a place that once drew teenagers for late-night bonfires, where the quiet felt thrilling rather than eerie. Emma remembered that Liam used to go there sometimes in the summer, always returning just before their mother could worry. She had never thought much of it, but now, the words felt ominous, like a door she hadn't known existed had been wedged open. The sentence, she knows more than she says, lingered like a shadow. Who was she? A teacher? A friend? Someone entirely outside their world? The thought burrowed into Emma's chest. She began watching people around her, noticing small expressions, the way voices hesitated, the way eyes drifted away. Everyone felt suspect in the light of that warning. School became a place stitched with hidden currents. Every hallway, every classroom seemed to hum with a quiet potential. She began mapping the places he had drawn in his sketches. The back entrance near the old gym, the tree line behind the football field, the rows of lockers near the science wing. She walked slower now, scanning the spaces as though expecting to find something he had hidden, trapped in time. Jake kept close, though he didn't push. His presence was a steadying force, calm where hers was restless. When they sat together in the library, he flipped through the notebook, pointing out repeated initials or symbols she had missed. I think these are dates, he murmured at one point, tapping a series of numbers written in tiny script. But they don't match anything I can remember. Emma wrote them down anyway, feeling instinctively that even the smallest detail might matter. The notebook also contained a strange list near the back, written with sharp, jagged motion, almost frantic. 3 names, only initials, no explanations. Next to each set of initials was a number. 1, 2, 3, and beneath it all, transfers, only on paper. Transfers. People changing schools, moving away, or something else entirely. The phrasing unsettled her. Liam had always been precise with language. If he'd meant students transferring, he would have written it plainly. These words felt coded, as though he'd been afraid someone might read them. One night, while studying the notebook again, she noticed something new, something she couldn't believe she had missed before. On the inside of the back cover, faint as though erased long ago, was a message written in pencil. If they ask, say nothing. Her stomach tightened. Who was they? Why would Liam need protection? Or worse, why would he think Emma might be questioned? For the first time since finding the notebook, fear bloomed inside her, cold and heavy. Days passed, and her attention settled on the phrase that appeared more than once. Asked about the transfers. She didn't know where to begin, but fate or chance offered the slightest push. It happened during lunch on a rainy Thursday. The cafeteria was loud, filled with the chaotic chatter of students trapped indoors. Emma sat across from Jake, flipping to the notebook again, when a group of juniors passed the table. One of them, tall, lean, with a faded Letterman jacket, was talking carelessly about someone who had left the school 2 years earlier. Remember that kid? The one who just transferred mid-semester? Yeah, weirdest thing. One day he's here, next day he's just gone. No goodbye, nothing. Emma froze. The group moved on, laughing, completely unaware of the earthquake they had triggered in her chest. She turned to Jake, who had heard it too. That was around when Liam, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The word transferred echoed in her mind like a warning bell. That afternoon, while students scattered toward buses and cars, Emma headed instead to the administrative office. The hallways felt longer than usual, lined with lockers that seemed to watch her pass. She tried to seem casual, though her pulse thudded in her ears. Behind the front desk sat an older receptionist named Mrs. Calhoun, who had been at the school longer than most teachers. Her hair was white, pinned neatly behind her ears, and she always smelled faintly of lavender. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked kindly. Emma hesitated. She had no plan, only questions buzzing under her skin. "I was wondering about student transfers. Around 2003. The receptionist blinked, surprised. "That's an odd question." Emma forced a tight smile. "It's for a school project." Mrs. Calhoun gave her a long look, the kind that seems to measure honesty. Finally, she nodded and clicked through files on her computer. "Records that old are archived," she murmured, "but I can check physical files later." "Would it be possible," Emma said quietly, "to see the list of students who left that year?" Mrs. Calhoun hesitated again. "I'm not sure I'm allowed to show you that." Emma's heart fluttered. "It's important. Please." The woman studied her face, and something softened in her expression, maybe pity, maybe understanding. She sighed. "You'll have to come back tomorrow. I'll pull what I can." Emma nodded, whispering a thank you before stepping back into the hallway. She felt both relieved and nauseous. She hadn't expected progress. She'd only expected confusion. But now there was a direction, a thread. That night, Emma could barely focus on homework. Every thought circled back to the notebook, to the river, the initials, the transfers. Her world, one predictable and numb, had shifted into something electric and dangerous. Before bed, she opened Liam's notebook again, flipping the page with the warning, "Don't trust him." Under the words, Liam had drawn a small arrow. It pointed to nothing, just white space. But something about that emptiness felt intentional, as though the real message had been removed or hidden. She pressed her thumb against it, feeling the textured page. On impulse, she held the page under her lamp, tilting it, looking for pressure marks. She thought she saw faint impressions, lines pressed deep into the paper. Something had once been written there, something erased. She ran her fingers across the page again, heart pounding. Whatever had been there, someone had wanted it gone. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it carried her into dreams where the river bent under moonlight and Liam stood on the bank, murmuring words she couldn't quite hear. She tried to reach him, to ask who she should fear, who she could trust, but his face blurred like mist. He pointed into the darkness beyond the willow trees. And then she woke, breathless, with a single thought ringing through her chest. This wasn't just a notebook. It was a warning, and she had only begun to understand the danger hidden inside it. The day after Emma's message, the mysterious number, sleep clung to her like humidity, thick, uncomfortable, and impossible to shake. Even when she drifted into dreams, nothing felt restful. The night had been a string of unfinished images. Liam's handwriting spiraling into darkness, the sound of footsteps behind her, the flicker of a flashlight sweeping through her childhood backyard. She woke more tired than before, unsure whether she had slept at all. Morning arrived quietly. A slate-gray sky hung low, promising rain but offering only stillness. Emma dressed slowly, every movement weighted by the lingering tremor in her hands. The unanswered text sat in the back of her mind like a spark waiting for oxygen. She kept checking her phone throughout breakfast, though she refused to admit, even to herself, that she was hoping for a reply. Her mother didn't join her in the kitchen. Most mornings she drifted downstairs, made coffee, and stared out the window without speaking. Today, she remained unseen. Emma could hear faint footsteps upstairs, slow, uneven, as if someone were pacing. The television murmured from behind a closed door, the only sign of life. Her father had already left for work. He didn't say goodbye anymore. By the time Emma stepped outside, the sky had darkened into a smoldering sheet. Leaves trembled on the maple branches, their edges curling inward as though bracing for something. She tugged her jacket closer and started toward school. The streets felt emptier than usual, too quiet, as if the whole neighborhood held its breath. Inside the school building, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The hallways filled with motion, voices, footsteps, laughter, but none of it touched Emma. She moved through the noise like a figure underwater, detached and silent. She kept her phone tucked against her palm, checking it every few seconds. No messages. She tried to stay focused. Tried to pretend that yesterday was just a strange coincidence. An eerie message from a number that had once belonged to Liam. Maybe it was some mix-up with the phone company. Maybe the sender was someone who bought the number later and happened to know his old locker. Maybe. But the handwriting inside the notebook, the way the letters dipped and curled, that wasn't coincidence. During her first class, an uneasy buzz settled behind her ribs. She kept replaying the text message she'd sent the night before. "Who are you?" Whoever it was hadn't answered, but her gut refused to let go. She felt watched, not in the literal sense, but in a quiet, unsettling way, like the message had awakened something that was now waiting to be acknowledged. Between classes, she ducked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection stared back, pale, tired, eyes ringed with sleepless shadow. She pressed her fingertips to her temples and tried to breathe. The air smelled faintly of bleach and powdered soap. When she stepped into the hallway again, the crowd felt different. Or maybe she did. As her next class began, she found her mind drifting toward memories she had long avoided. Snapshots of Liam captured in motion. Him sitting on the edge of the porch, tapping his shoes against the step. Him reading late at night, the lamp beside his bed illuminating pages like treasure maps. Him offering her a piece of toast on a morning just like this one, before vanishing into a world she could not follow. She felt the ache sharpen. During lunch, she again retreated to her usual spot near the window. Rain had finally begun to fall, thin needle droplets tapping against the glass, blurring the courtyard outside. She ate quietly alone, her phone face up on the table. Still nothing. Yet the silence felt poised rather than empty. Her mind kept returning to the notebook page she'd found. The first truth is here, but the second waits where we used to hide. Had Liam written it? And if he had, when, if he left it for her, how could he have known she would find it 3 years later? Her heart tightened. Some truths refused to die. After school, the rain deepened. The world seemed dimmer, sharper, every sound more pronounced. She walked home without speaking to anyone, footsteps echoing against wet pavement. The streetlights flickered on earlier than usual, as though the evening couldn't wait to arrive. Inside the house, everything looked the same. The living room was still, the curtains drawn. Her mother sat curled on the couch, staring at nothing, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't look up when Emma entered. Emma hesitated, wanted to say something, anything, but silence won. It always did. She went upstairs, shut her bedroom door, and sat on the floor, pulling out the notebook. She stared at the message again, the one written in Liam's unmistakable hand. Where we used to hide. Only one place came to mind. Behind the shed at the edge of their backyard, there was a narrow sliver of space shielded by old latticework and wild ivy. When they were younger, Emma and Liam used to sneak back there, pretending it was a secret passageway only they knew. They had contraband snacks and old toys, convinced the place belonged to them alone. She hadn't been back there since he vanished. The memory crawled into her chest, becoming a breath she could neither inhale nor release. As the rain continued to fall, tapping softly against the house, Emma made up her mind. She would go. Outside, the backyard felt colder, more foreign than she remembered. Wet grass soaked through her shoes, clinging to her ankles. The shed stood unchanged, paint peeling, roof sagging. The air smelled of damp earth and rust. She stepped toward the narrow gap. Ivy brushed against her sleeve, leaving dark streaks. For a moment, fear rooted her in place, the kind that was almost nostalgic, like returning to a dream you weren't sure you wanted to finish. But she forced herself forward. The space was just as tight as she remembered. She crouched, dirt damp against her knees, and reached behind the lattice. Her fingers brushed something smooth. A metal box. Her pulse spiked. She pulled it out with trembling hands. The box was small, silver, scratched along the edges. A combination lock hung from the latch, rusted but intact. She recognized the numbers engraved on its surface. Faded, blurry, but familiar. Their old anniversary code. The day Liam had first taught her how to ride a bike. She entered the numbers with stiff fingers. The latch clicked. She hesitated, breath caught between her ribs. Then she opened it. Inside, there were 3 items: a folded map, a small key, and a photograph that made her entire body go cold. The photo was of Liam, taken at the old amusement pier, smiling, sun in his hair. But behind him stood a figure she didn't recognize. No face, just a blurred outline, watching him, standing too close. Her vision wavered. The air around her seemed to still, thickening. Before she could process what she was seeing, her phone vibrated. One unread message. Her stomach dropped. The number was the same as before. This time, the message was only 4 words. "You're getting close, Emma." For a long moment, she could not breathe. The world felt impossibly small, pressing inward. Every sound muted. Every thought sharpened into a point of fear. Rain continued to fall around her, whispering against the shed roof, as if urging her deeper into the past she had tried so hard to bury. The truth was no longer sleeping, and neither was she. Night settled over the Dalton house with an oppressive stillness, the kind that felt almost intentional, like the quiet was watching. Shadows from the streetlights pressed themselves against Emma's bedroom walls, bending with the movement of tree branches outside. The rain had finally stopped, but its scent lingered in the air, cold, metallic, and strangely electric. Emma sat on her bed, back hunched, the metal box open beside her like a wound. The photograph lay between her palms. She stared so long her eyes stung, trying to understand something that felt too large to hold. Liam was smiling in that picture, easy, open, his hair messy from the ocean breeze. Behind him stood that blurred figure. Not quite a shadow, not quite a person. The outline was too close, almost touching. The lack of a visible face made it even worse. It was as though someone had reached into the photo and ripped out the features on purpose. She tried to remember the day the photo might have been taken. The Dalton family used to spend summer weekends at the old amusement pier, before everything fractured. She remembered the seafood stands, the chipped paint on the carousel horses, Liam's laughter echoing over crashing waves. But she couldn't remember him ever standing with someone like that, someone who didn't belong. Her phone buzzed on the bed, the sound slicing through the silence. She flinched, breath catching. No new message, just the earlier one, glowing like an accusation. "You're getting close, Emma." She wanted to text back, to ask who they were, to demand answers. But her hands trembled, and her throat tightened with fear that felt too raw, too familiar. She set the phone down, pressing her palms against her eyes until stars bloomed behind her eyelids. Whoever was contacting her wasn't doing it randomly. They knew her name. They knew about the metal box. They knew she found it. How? The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her tense. Slow, heavy steps, the kind her father made. They paused outside her room. She held still, waiting, A quiet knock. "Emma?" Her father's voice was soft, strained. Something in it made her chest ache. "Yeah," she answered, trying to sound steady. The doorknob turned. Her father stepped inside, still dressed from work, tie loosened, hair rumpled. He looked older than he should, his face lined, his eyes hollow with the grief that never left him. He managed a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Didn't see you at dinner," he said. "I wasn't hungry." His gaze drifted to the box on her bed. The smile vanished. "What's that?" She stiffened, instinct screaming to hide it. "Just something from school." But his attention sharpened. He walked closer, stopping beside her bed. The moment he looked down at the photograph, his expression changed. First confusion, then recognition, then something darker. "Where did you get this?" His voice dropped, tight with fear. Emma swallowed. "Behind the shed. It was in this box." His hand trembled as he picked up the picture. He studied it like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the way he remembered. This was taken the summer before. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Emma leaned forward. "Who's that behind him? Do you know?" Her father didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed, as though trying to see details that were intentionally missing. "No," he said quietly. But something in his voice felt wrong, hesitant. "You're lying," she whispered. He flinched. Before he could respond, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. They both froze. Emma's mother appeared in the doorway, pale, hair unbrushed, wearing an oversized sweater that hung off a frame. Her eyes flicked from the box to the photo to Emma. "What's going on?" She spoke in a voice barely more than breath. Emma looked at her father, waiting. He set the photo down slowly. "Nothing," he murmured. "It's nothing." Her mother stared at him, long, searching. Emma felt something pass between them, invisible but heavy, like a door opening to a memory neither wanted to see. Her mother stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she reached for the photograph. When she saw the blurred figure behind Liam, she gasped, sharp, high-pitched, like a wound reopening. "No." Her voice broke. "Not again." Emma felt her skin go cold. "Again? What do you mean, again?" Her mother's eyes darted to Emma, wide and terrified. "Where did you get this?" Emma pointed. "Behind the shed, with a map and a key." Her mother backed away a step, shaking her head rapidly. "We shouldn't," she looked toward the hallway. "We shouldn't talk about this here." Her father placed a hand on her mother's shoulder, guiding her out of the room. "Emma," he said gently, "we'll discuss it in the morning. Put it away for now. Please." He looked at her with something desperate, pleading. She had never seen him look afraid. Not like this. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, to scream, but the weight of their fear pressed her into silence. When they left, closing the door behind them, she sat on the bed trembling, her heart racing. Every instinct told her they were hiding something. And if they were this scared, then whatever she'd found wasn't just a clue. It was a threat. She picked up the small key from the metal box. It was made of old brass, worn smooth, a tiny number etched into its side. 211. Her mind raced through possibilities. A storage unit? A locker? A door she'd forgotten existed? Then she unfolded the map. It was of their town, but older, faded. Streets were named long ago. A red circle marked a spot near the river, at the edge of town where the woods thickened and the ground dipped sharply toward dark water. In tiny handwriting beneath the red circle, "He goes where the river forgets." Her breath hitched. She felt suddenly watched, not by someone in the room, but by something in the memory of the place itself, an echo that hadn't settled. Her phone screen lit again. A new text. This time, the message read, "Don't tell them. They'll make you stop." She dropped the phone, pulse thundering in her ears. Someone was watching not just her actions, but her conversations. Someone knew the moment her parents walked away. Someone was close. Her breaths came faster and more uneven. She locked her bedroom door instinctively, then pressed her back against it, sliding down to floor. Her mind spiraled. The blurred figure, her parents' fear, the hidden box, the map, the key. The message. The truth felt no longer like a distant possibility, but a storm moving straight toward her. She clutched the map against her chest, eyes burning. She didn't know who she could trust anymore. But one thing was certain. Whatever her parents were frightened of wasn't gone. It was returning, and it wanted her to keep digging. The house creaked around her, settling into its nighttime silence. But she could no longer tell if the sounds were innocent. Every noise felt personal, intentional. She lay awake until dawn, gripping the key tightly, afraid to close her eyes, because she knew, once she found the river, there would be no going back. Dawn arrived pale and uncertain, draining the night of its shadows but not of its questions. The sunlight that filtered through Emma's curtains felt thin, weak, almost hesitant, as though it was afraid of what it would uncover. She had barely slept, drifting in and out of shallow, restless dreams where she was running to the forest by the river, always chasing a voice she could never catch. When her alarm buzzed, the sound startled her, not because it was loud, but because she had forgotten that normal things still existed. For a moment, she stared at it as if it belonged to another life. Then she silenced and sat upright, shoulders stiff, her body aching with exhaustion. The map and key lay on her nightstand, placed carefully as though they needed protection. Her phone rested nearby, the screen black, but somehow still threatening, like a door that might burst open at any moment. She dressed quietly, avoiding the creak in her floorboard, though she didn't know why. Once she slipped downstairs, she paused on the last step, listening. Her parents were in the kitchen. Their voices were low, urgent, not angrily, but desperately, as though trying to keep their words small enough that they wouldn't attract attention. Emma hesitated, hovering in the space between steps and tile. "I told you we should have taken everything out of that yard," her mother whispered. "We left it too long." "We didn't think she'd look," her father replied, voice tight. "We didn't think. We never think far enough. He told us it wasn't finished, and we ignored him." Emma froze. Her breath caught. "He told us." "Liam?" Her father sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "What matters now is making sure she doesn't go any farther. If she goes near the river." The sentence dissolved into silence, but Emma didn't need the rest. Her mother spoke again, voice trembling. "What if it starts again?" Her father didn't answer. Emma stepped back, heart pounding hard enough to hurt. A wave of heat washed over her, then cold. The kitchen seemed impossibly far away, though only 10 steps separated them. She wanted to confront them. She wanted to demand the answers she deserved. But another voice whispered inside her, quiet, instinctual. "Not yet." She slipped back upstairs, careful not to make a sound. She grabbed the map, the key, and shoved both into her backpack. Then she stood in front of her bedroom window, staring out at the pale morning. The world looked deceptively ordinary. Bikes lying on lawns, mailboxes waiting patiently, the distant hum of someone's mower starting early. But beneath that quiet surface, something was rising. She could feel it. At school, she walked through the halls like a sleepwalker. Everything blurred, voices, colors, faces passing by without form. But under that haze was a current of tension, like static. She couldn't tell if the feeling came from within or if it surrounded her. In her first class, the teacher's voice was a distant echo. Emma's mind kept replaying her parents' conversation. What if it starts again? What had happened 3 years ago that she didn't know about? What had they hidden? Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A single vibration. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. Slowly, she slid the phone out. No message. No notification. Nothing. But she knew it had vibrated. She gripped it tighter, unsettled. Her palms felt clammy, her thoughts racing. Between classes, she slipped into an empty stairwell and sat on the bottom step. She unfolded the map, tracing the circled spot by the river. The faded lines looked almost hand-drawn, the ink slightly smudged in places. Beneath the red circle, the message whispered again, "He goes where the river forgets." The word seemed less like a clue and more like a warning. Her stomach churned. In her second class, her attention was pulled abruptly when she felt someone watching her. Not just glancing, watching. She lifted her eyes. Across the room, a boy she barely recognized stood halfway out of his chair, staring. His expression was unreadable, focused, curious, too still. When she met his gaze, he quickly looked away, dropping back into his seat. Her pulse jumped. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, just a coincidence, someone lost in thought. But the way he had stared wasn't casual. It was intent. During lunch, she sat alone as usual, but today the cafeteria felt hostile. Conversations blended into one restless hum. Every time she looked up, she felt like eyes darted away. Her imagination, she told herself, just nerves, lack of sleep, yet her body disagreed. Her shoulders stiffened, and she found herself sitting with her back to the wall, instinctively protecting her blind side. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message. Do not trust the river alone. Her breath faltered. She typed quickly. Who are you? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, a message. I'm someone he trusted. She stared, hardly breathing. Another message followed before she could respond. Meet me after school. The old peer. Don't tell them. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She typed, Why should I believe you? No answer. She waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. She slid the phone away, hands shaking. The pier, the place in the photograph, where Liam had once stood smiling, unaware of the shadow behind him. Her mind tangled with fear and urgency. She knew the pier was abandoned now, closed after storm damaged its structure. Her mother had once said it was dangerous, that no one should go near it. But someone wanted to meet her there. Someone who claimed Liam trusted them. A thought whispered through her. What if it's him? Her heart soared and collapsed at the same time. Hope and horror collided, leaving her dizzy. She couldn't ignore the possibility, not after everything she'd seen. But what if it wasn't him? What if it was the person behind the blurred figure in the photograph? She felt caught between two dangers, inaction and pursuit. Both paths threatened to break her. After school, she stood at her locker, the hallway emptying around her. The metal walls felt cold against her skin. She dug through her backpack, fingers brushing the map and key. Her throat tightened. Then she felt movement beside her. She turned. It was the same boy from earlier, the one who had stared. He stood too close, eyes locked on hers. Emma, right? He asked quietly. She nodded, unsure. I'm Nathan. His voice was calm, too calm. He glanced down the hall, making sure no one watched. Then he leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. You shouldn't go alone. Emma felt her heart stutter. Go where? How did he know? Her voice came out thin. What are you talking about? Nathan's eyes held something raw. Fear mixed with certainty. The pier, he said. Everything inside her went still. Before she could react, he stepped back. Just don't go alone. He walked away, disappearing into a classroom without another word. Emma stood frozen, breath trembling. The hallway felt impossibly long, stretching into darkness she couldn't see. Someone knew her plan. Someone she'd never spoken to. Someone at school. The map, the text messages, the photograph, the boy. All of it was converging, pulling her toward the river and the pier, whether she wanted to go or not. Her choice was already made, not by her, but by the truth. That night, as the sky darkened again, Emma stood at the edge of her room, staring at the map spread across her bed. Her pulse thrummed like a warning and an invitation both. She slipped the key into her pocket, folded the map carefully, and whispered into the empty room. Liam, please, let me be right. Because tomorrow she would go to the pier. And she knew, whatever waited there would change everything. As time moves onward like a silent river, the memories of a single moment soften, stretching into something wider and deeper than we ever expected. What once felt like an intense spark becomes a steady glow, warming us quietly from within. The person who changed us with single exchange may no longer be beside us, yet the echo of their presence lingers. Sometimes it returns to us suddenly, through a gentle breeze, a familiar scent, or a phrase whispered in a crowded place. It is strange how something that barely lasted in real time can continue unfolding in the landscape of our minds long after. The distance grows, and we learn to accept that life seldom gives us what we think it will. What mattered most wasn't the longevity of the encounter, but the depth with which it touched us. Over the months and years, we find meaning in that brief connection. We realize that the moment was never meant to stay. It was meant to teach. It taught us that sometimes our greatest growth is sparked by someone who arrives only once. They show us something new about the world, and then they go, like a comet passing through a night sky. We carry that memory through seasons of change. On quiet days, it may feel as vivid as the moment it was born. On others, it may fade like dust on our palms, impossible to hold. And yet it remains. Even when its edges blur, the feeling it left behind endures. We understand that we are not the same person we were before them. Their presence offered us a new way of seeing, a new way of feeling, a new way of being. And though their absence may sting from time to time, we treasure the chapter they left inside us. Eventually, time teaches us to stop questioning what could have been. Instead, we honor what simply was. The story does not need to continue physically for its impact to live on. Some encounters are complete as they are, small but whole, perfect in their incompleteness. And while the world keeps moving forward, we walk with a quiet wisdom that even fleeting connections can shape us more profoundly than the ones that stay. The heart remembers not by length, but by intensity, by truth, and by the way it was changed forever. There are moments when we try to move on, pretending we have already untangled ourselves from the weight of what once mattered. But memory has a quiet persistence. It returns when we least expect it, not out of cruelty, but because some emotions refuse to fade. We learn that closure does not always arrive in clear words or final conversations. Sometimes it is simply the act of breathing through the ache, accepting that not every story reaches a conclusion we can hold in our hands. We may attempt to convince ourselves that time is enough to erase what happened, yet time does not erase, it reshapes. The feeling stays, just no longer sharp. It becomes something deeper, folded into the shadows of who we have become. We carry fragments of that moment like smooth stones in our pockets, subtle, almost weightless, but always there. If we touch them, the memory awakens, reminding us of what we once felt so intensely. Some nights, when the world quiets and distractions fade, the mind drifts back, not because we are stuck, but because we are human. We remember the warmth of presence, the electricity of conversation that changed everything, or the gentle comfort of simply being understood. These memories do not ask for permission. They just arrive, stirring emotions we thought had settled long ago. Over time, we begin to understand that holding on is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence that something mattered deeply. Life never promises clean transitions or tidy endings. It only promises motion. And so, we keep moving, carrying both joy and sorrow, learning to live with the quiet paradox that we can let go without forgetting and remember without clinging. In that balance, there is peace. Not immediate, not perfect, but real. We no longer wish to rewrite the past. We stop searching for answers in places that no longer exist. Instead, we learn to coexist with our memories, allowing them to breathe within us. They become gentle reminders of everything that shaped us, guiding us forward with their soft, enduring light. There are moments when a story stops belonging only to the person who lived it. It begins to echo, stretching beyond the limits of time, becoming something larger than itself. Something that quietly threads into the lives of others without permission. When she finally stood at the threshold of truth, the air around her felt strangely still, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting to see whether she would step forward or walk away. Everything in her life had once revolved around a single question, but now she sensed a new one unfolding beneath it, quieter yet infinitely heavier. What will this truth cost? She had expected relief, maybe even a burst of clarity. Instead, there was a strange ache beneath her ribs, as though the truth had always been a part of her body, waiting to be awakened. The clues her brother left scattered like breadcrumbs were never instructions. They were confessions, memories, apologies disguised as puzzles. Each symbol was a moment he could not place in words. Each scribbled line was a voice he could not raise. And now, as she traced his path with her fingertips, she realized that this story was never about disappearance. It was about trying to be seen, before fading. She found a small message tucked inside the final envelope, written in her brother's uneven handwriting, delicate yet determined. It was not dramatic, not poetic, just honest. He wrote that he felt like he was vanishing from himself long before anyone noticed he was gone. He confessed he had been afraid not of the world outside, but of the silence within. He feared that if he spoke about what weighed on him, he would be misunderstood, dismissed, or worse, believed. In quiet, trembling lines, he tried to explain that he had never meant to leave her behind. He simply no longer knew how to stay. Nothing in those words gave her the closure she imagined. Instead, they built a bridge between memory and regret, between ignorance and understanding. She tried to read between the lines, hoping to find instructions or blame or warning, but there was none. There was only his truth, simple, fragile, and painfully human. She held the note against her chest, as if pressing it closer would make it speak more clearly. But silence remained, a silence that felt both empty and overflowing at once. Later, she found herself walking the quiet halls of the high school they once shared. Not as a student, but as someone returning to a familiar landscape that no longer remembered her. The walls had been repainted. The floors carried different footsteps. Yet beneath the newness, she could still feel the ghost of her younger self moving beside him. She imagined the conversations they never had, the moments when he looked distracted, distant, as though listening to something only he could hear. She understood now that those were the moments he was slipping away, piece by piece. She paused near the old science wing, noticing the faint echo of their laughter from years ago, weaving through the emptiness like a lingering melody. It reminded her of the way he used to pretend everything was fine, even when his eyes betrayed him. She remembered asking him once if he was okay, and how he responded with a smile that was too quick, too neat. At the time, she believed him. Now she wished she hadn't. The truth rarely arrives like a thunderclap. More often, it arrives quietly, carrying a softness that unravels the heart slowly. She realized that her brother had not left clues for her to solve a mystery. He had left messages for her to feel less alone when she finally found the truth. He had given her pieces of himself so she could understand him even after he was gone. His disappearance was not an escape. It was a surrender. That night, she returned to the attic, where the journey began. The room felt different now, less like a vault of secrets, more like a space that had served its purpose. She opened the box one last time, letting her eyes take in each object with new clarity. The map, the notes, the strange symbols, none of them felt cryptic anymore. Instead, they felt intimate, like pieces of a conversation he never had the courage to speak aloud. She spread them across the floor, creating a constellation of memory and meaning, connecting them with invisible lines only she could see. She sat there until the moon moved farther across the sky, watching shadows shift across the paper. For the first time, she felt her brother not as a ghost or a question, but as a gentle presence settling beside her. His story no longer felt like a locked room. It felt open, unfinished, breathing. She thought of all the timelines that could have unfolded if he had stayed, all the laughter that might have filled the years between then and now. The ache sharpened, then softened again, like waves passing over stone. There were no neat conclusions waiting for her, no sudden light breaking through. The truth did not end the story. It changed its shape. She understood now that her journey had never been about finding him. It was about finding the part of herself that disappeared with him. The girl who once trusted that life moved in straight lines had returned with the understanding that life was made of circles, returning, repeating, reshaping, revisiting. As dawn crept through the narrow window, painting the attic in a quiet glow, she gathered the notes and placed them gently back in the box. Not to hide them, but to honor them, to acknowledge that some stories are meant to be carried rather than displayed. She closed the lid, not with finality, but with reverence, like sealing a promise only the heart could keep. She whispered his name into the morning light, not hoping for an answer. The silence that followed felt different now, not empty, but complete. A silence that held memory, love, and something close to forgiveness. She knew she would keep searching, not for new clues, but for the meaning within the ones she already held. She would move forward, carrying the quiet truth that sometimes the most important discoveries are not about where someone went, but why they drifted away. And even though the world would continue without him, she felt a quiet certainty that his story would remain with her, not as a wound, but as a reminder of how deeply we can love someone even after they are gone. Sometimes, closure is not knowing the end. Sometimes, closure is simply finding the strength to keep living with what remains. Long after the phone calls stopped and the questions quieted, her world seemed to fold into a softer, stranger silence, the kind that lingers even when nothing is being said. At first, she tried to resume the pace of ordinary life, arranging her routines like pieces of a puzzle she no longer remembered how to solve. She returned to work, visited the same grocery store where she used to go with him, passed the park bench where they once sat sharing ice cream, and secrets that felt too small to matter. But now, these places felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by versions of themselves that no longer existed. The world kept moving, but she felt suspended just an inch above her own footsteps. Friends asked how she was, and she answered in quiet, practiced tones. "I'm okay. I'm getting through. It's complicated." Words as fragile as thin glass. Most people nodded, relieved at the simplicity, unsure how to ask more without stepping into the territory where pain was still raw. Some offered advice that tasted hollow. Some offered silence that seemed too wide. She learned quickly that grief was not a shared language. It was a private dialect only hearts in mourning understood. And so, she kept most of her story inside, not to protect herself, but to protect her brother from being reduced to a headline or a curiosity. Late at night, she found herself writing letters addressed to him. Never sent, never shared. Just words spilling across paper, forming the conversations they never got to finish. Sometimes she wrote about her day. Sometimes she told him things she remembered. The time he delighted in a thunderstorm that frightened everyone else in the house, or the night he stayed up reading, believing stories were safer than dreams. She wrote as though he were simply away, temporarily unreachable, not gone the way everyone assumed. In those letters, she allowed herself to pretend. Soon, these letters became a ritual, a breathing space between the life she lived outside and the one she carried within. Each time her pen moved, she felt something shift, a release, a softening. She began to realize that her connection to him did not depend on presence. It lived in memory, in longing, in the quiet, unbroken thread between their two hearts. Grief, she learned, was not an ending but a rearrangement of love, of time, of who we become after loss. One evening, when the light was fading and the world outside her window was blurred with rain, she opened the box of clues again, not to solve anything, but to sit with them the way one sits with a friend. She spread the notes across her kitchen table and traced the ink with her fingers, as though touching them could bridge the distance that separated their timelines. The pages smelled faintly of attic dust and something indistinguishable, a warmth, perhaps a residue of the hands that had once held them. He felt strangely near in that moment, as though the space between absence and presence had thinned. She found herself whispering to him, not out of desperation, but out of comfort. She talked about the weather, about how she'd started cooking the meals he once loved, about how his favorite song had followed her to the grocery store unexpectedly that afternoon. She didn't ask why he left, not anymore. The question had dissolved, replaced by something gentler. She no longer needed to untangle every thread. Her heart understood more than her mind ever could. He had been fighting shadows none of them could see, and this story, all of it, was his way of trying to say goodbye without disappearing completely. As days grew into weeks, she noticed subtle changes in herself. The sleep that once felt unreachable returned in small increments. The ache that used to sit heavily behind her ribs slowly migrated, becoming something quieter, like a bruise that had begun to heal. She still felt him, in dreams, in the quiet corners of her thoughts, in the moments when she least expected memory to strike. But the grief no longer suffocated her. It walked beside her, patient and steady, like a companion she had learned not to fear. She started revisiting places they had once shared, not to mourn, but to remember. She sat at the old pier where he used to skip stones, watching ripples stretch across the water like long, reaching hands. She visited the bookstore where he spent hours wandering, rereading pages as though looking for hidden messages. She even returned to their childhood home, touching the walls still faintly etched with laughter. None of these places brought answers, but they brought connection, a reminder that his story wasn't defined solely by how it ended, but by how he lived, imperfect and beautiful. One afternoon, while sitting at the pier, she noticed a young boy trying to skip rocks, but failing each time. He grew frustrated, ready to give up, without thinking. She showed him how her brother taught her, not by force, but by guiding her hand gently, letting her feel the rhythm. The boy listened, tried again, and the stone danced across the surface, skipping twice before disappearing beneath the water. He smiled, pure and triumphant, and in his expression she saw a shadow of her brother, a tenderness that hit her like a slow, warm flame. She thanked the moment silently. Small gestures became a way to honor him. Over time, she began to speak of him more freely, not as someone who vanished, but as someone who lived. She shared stories of his kindness, his humor, the way his imagination made even the simplest things feel extraordinary. When people listened, she felt less alone. And when they didn't understand, she learned that understanding was not the point. His life had shaped hers in ways too intricate for explanation. It existed beyond words. One night, she dreamed of him, not as a memory, but as though he were truly there. They stood in a dim hallway, light drifting through the cracks beneath the door. He looked older, calmer. He didn't speak, but his eyes held something she couldn't name. Love, perhaps. Gratitude. He reached toward her, touching her hand with warmth that felt real enough to anchor her body in stillness. She woke with tears on her cheeks, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of peace. It was as though he had returned not to linger, but to gently remind her that she had done enough, more than enough. From then on, she no longer searched for new meaning in his clues. She let them be what they were, a language of the heart, written in fragments he left behind. Some pieces she understood, others would remain mysteries. But that was life, always partly known, always partly unseen. She accepted that some answers live beyond reach, not to torment us, but to invite us to live with open hands. In the quiet spaces of her days, she carried him, not like a shadow, but like a soft light tucked beneath her ribs. She continued writing her letters, cooking his favorite meals, skipping stones at the pier. She discovered that remembrance was not a cage that kept her from moving forward. It was the very thing that allowed her to. Each memory became a bridge to all the moments still ahead, shaped by the love that remained. Even in his absence, he guided her, not toward closure, but toward understanding that stories do not end when someone leaves. They continue to unfold within us, in the choices we make, in the ways we love, in the quiet conversations we have with the past. And so, she kept living, not despite her grief, but because of it, honoring the beautiful truth that love does not disappear when someone does. It lingers, patient and soft, long after the world has turned the page. The seasons pass gently, as though the world had learned to move more quietly around her grief. She noticed things she once overlooked, how winter light softened the corners of every room, how spring rain sounded like distant murmurs on the glass. Life no longer felt like something rushing forward. It unfolded like pages turning slowly beneath careful hands. She returned to the old high school one late afternoon, when the halls were empty and still. Walking through them felt strange, like stepping into a memory that hadn't realized time had moved on. The air carried a faint scent of paper and polished floors, familiar, grounding. She found the library where her brother once spent hours, tucked in corners searching for stories large enough to hold his quiet mind. There, hidden inside a worn hardback, she found a pressed leaf and a message in his handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you found your way back. The words struck her with a warmth that felt like a hand resting gently over her heart. He had thought of her. He had left something small but tender, meant only for her to find. She closed the book and held it to her chest, breathing slowly until her thoughts stilled. Outside, dusk settled over the school field, turning the grass into muted gold. She walked toward an old tree near the fence. Their initials were still carved into its bark. The sight of them grounded her, a reminder that some pieces of the past remain, even when everything else drifts away. She whispered that she had followed his clues, that she carried him still. The wind stirred, brushing against her cheek, like a quiet answer. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something gently loosen inside her, not closure, but a peace soft enough to hold.